Today we're going to put up a frame tent, a 20 by 20 frame tent. Now the first thing that we'll do is we'll lay out our sidebars and our pipes that run from the corner to the center, along with all the corner pieces, all the legs. We'll lay the pieces out in the general shape of a 20 by 20 area. Then we'll actually start putting the pieces together at the corner. The piece that you see here is what we call a corner fitting. You take the pipe that has the button on it and you insert it into the fitting until the button snaps into place, as you see here. After you put the corner together, then you'll walk up to the center and put the center piece in. Then you continue on down to the corner and put the second corner together. The part of the corner fitting that goes down towards the ground is the longest part on the fitting. When you finish that corner, then you'll go on to the fitting in the center of the side, and you'll notice on the center pieces the B, the large B at the bottom. The B stands for bottom, and it's very important that that B is facing the ground and not up in the air. The angle is very similar, but that's why the B is there. The B has to be downwards. And then you go to the next corner. You install the pipe, the sidebar, into the corner fitting, and you continue this process over and over till you get all the way around the tent. Each sidebar has a big pressure button, and you slide the pipe in, the sidebar in, until the button lines up with the hole, like you see Mike doing here, and then the button will pop into the hole and you go on to the next piece. When you get through, you'll have a square that looks similar to this here. The next part of the process will be to put the 4 longest pipes that go from the corner of the tent up to the center of the tent, up to what we call the center crown. It's much easier to do these 4 pieces first and then the pipes that go from the center to the edge of the tent or to the side of the tent. Always do the longest pipes first and then the shortest pipes. The piece that Mike is holding up to the camera here is what we call the center crown. You'll notice that some of the pieces, or some of the holes if you will, are longer than the others. You have the short ones and the long ones. The long ones are where you will insert the pipe that goes from the center crown to the center of the side of the tent. The shorter tubes are where the pipes will go from the crown to the corner of the tent, like you see in this picture here. And that's what you want to do first, is the 4 pipes that go to the corners. After you get the corner pipes in, then you go back and you insert the pipes that go from the crown to the side. Always start at the top and work your way down. This is much simpler. One thing to remember is that if you have your pieces placed properly, your frame will snap together very easily, requiring very little effort. Now if the pipes seem like they don't fit, or if they're jammed and they're tight, you have a piece somewhere that is positioned incorrectly. When you have your frame all put together, then you want to take your bases, your leg bases, and snap them onto the bottom of the leg, like you see being done here. Then you will take all your legs and you lay them out in position next to the fittings where they will be going eventually after you raise the frame. This gets the frame ready to raise when we get to that point. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the tent top and unroll it up close next to the frame to where the tent top will be ready to unfold and drag over the frame. It's important to remember that a tent top is fragile in the sense that it's very susceptible to abrasion. You don't want to drag your tent top around while it's in a roll. This will wear a hole in it. Any contact with asphalt, concrete, or any sharp edges tends to either cut a hole in the tent or wear a hole in the tent due to abrasion. Now that we have the tent top stretched out over the frame, the next thing to do is to hook at least one of the straps at each corner just to sort of hold the top in place while we raise the tent. Then you take the 2 corners on either end of the tent and you raise the tent up, and your helper inserts the pole into the fitting at the corner. And one thing to remember is leave your poles as short as possible. The poles are adjustable, the legs that is are adjustable, so leave them short and we'll raise them later. Then, after you have the first two corners inserted, you go into the center of the tent or the side of the tent and you insert those legs. And finally, you insert the legs on the far corner. This is the same whether it's a 20 by 20 or a 20 by 40 or any other size of tent. It's the same process. Now that the tent is actually up and we are finishing inserting all of the legs, the next step will be to secure all the buckles around the perimeter of the tent. We're almost ready to hang the sidewall, but before we hang the sidewall, we need to go around and secure all of the buckles on the tent. All the way around the perimeter of the tent, you have a series of buckles that you need to tighten around the sidebar that goes around the perimeter of the tent. Now, one thing we want to be sure of is that we do not get any individual buckle too tight. When you get through fastening all the buckles, if you see that a particular buckle is wrinkling the tent next to the buckle, we need to loosen that buckle, because if any individual buckle is too tight, at some point it will tend to rip out of the tent. So the buckles need to be snug but not overly tight. Now that we have the buckles all secure, we can begin to adjust the legs. Each leg is adjustable and can be adjusted to compensate for ground that's uneven or just to raise the tent to the desired height. Now the legs are all adjusted and it's time to hang the sidewall. The first thing you do when you hang the sidewall is you go to wherever you want to have a doorway, and that's where you lay your first two sidewalls and you unroll them like you see here. One wall will go around the perimeter of the tent in one direction. The opposite wall will go around the perimeter of the tent in the opposite direction. Where the two sidewalls begin, they will overlap by 5 feet. This overlap is what you will use to create a doorway. Now, the placement of the doorway is arbitrary. You can place the doorway anywhere on the tent that you desire, but that's where you would normally start hanging your sidewall, is at the desired location of the first door on your tent. Obviously, the larger the tent, the more doorways you can create, but the most important doorway is where you would always start to hang your sidewall so that you can get that placement exactly in the position that you desire. You start by hanging the wall from the end. You snap the walls up on the rope that is at the top of the perimeter of the tent. Around the perimeter of the tent there is what we call the sidewall rope. This goes around the entire perimeter. The top edge of the sidewall has a series of snaps, and you simply snap those snaps into that perimeter rope or the sidewall rope around and around the tent until all of the sidewalls are hung. And it is helpful if you have someone stretch the sidewall out for you while you hang the snaps. That helps get the sidewall installed a little more tightly than if you just pull the wall up from the ground one snap at a time. You can see how the second person in the video here is actually holding up the wall while the first person is snapping the wall. This just makes it easier, although one person can do it by themselves if necessary. When you have your wall up, then you go back and create your doorway. If you remember, when we started hanging the walls, we let them overlap 5 feet. You take the end of the sidewall and you will unsnap it from where you had already hung that end up, and you fold the first end back towards one direction, and the end from the other sidewall will fold back in the opposite direction. This creates an adjustable door that you can make whatever size you wish. Now that the tent is completely installed, we get to take it all back down again. This is what we call our teardown procedure. After removing the sidewall, the first thing that you will do is remove all the buckles that attach the tent top to the frame. Then you will start removing all the legs around the perimeter of the tent so that you can lower the tent frame with the top still attached to the ground. This is basically a reverse procedure of what we did when we installed the tent. You will remove the two legs on one corner and the pipe in the center of that same side, and then you will move to the middle of the sides and remove those legs. That will allow you to lower down the first side of the tent to the ground. After the majority of the legs are out of the tent and you have one side lowered to the ground, then you'll be able to lower the last side of the tent. You can see them lowering the first side of the tent here to the ground. The main thing is to be careful and have plenty of help so that you don't injure yourself or damage your tent. Now you can see the last edge of the tent is still up in the air, and what they will do is they will remove the legs on this side of the tent and then very carefully lower the tent to the ground so that we can remove the tent top from the frame. Removing the tent top really requires two people, if at all possible. What you do when you get the frame lowered all the way to the ground, then when the tent is on the ground, you and your helper will go back to either of the two corners, and you take the corner of the tent top and you pull away from each other and keep it tight so that you can pull it up over the assembled frame. After you get the tent folded in half, then you pull it out onto the ground to where you will be able to fold the tent top up in a nice neat roll so that it will fit into the bag. After you get your tent laid out nice and flat, then each of you will take opposing corners and fold the edge of the tent in towards the center of the tent top. You will actually fold this 2 or 3 times depending on the size of the tent. Once the tent is completely folded up, you will have a nice long roll of canvas that you'll be able to roll up into a nice tight roll that will fit into the bag. After you get the tent completely folded like you see here, then you simply roll the tent top from one end towards the opposite end, and it's helpful to tie the tent roll with a rope. Then you stand the tent section up and slip the bag over the tent section to keep the tent protected. You want to make sure that when you take your tent down that your sidewall and your tent top is completely dry. If you fold your tent top up when it's damp, it can mildew and stain your tent.